Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and in this video you're checking out my ultimate champion point grind guide for the Elder Scrolls Online. And by that I mean we're going through every possible thing you need to know in order to earn the most champion points possible in the fastest way possible, including the best gear set options, gear traits, potions, food and drink, skills, new champion point passives, and some of my favorite all-time XP grind spots. So strap in and get ready. The Ultimate CP Grind Guide starts right now. All right, before we jump into our grind locations for this video, I want to talk about a basic build setup. What is the ideal way to set up your build for grinding champion points now? Well, let's talk about gear first. Now, your build, of course, is up to you, but just for a basic grinding setup, I recommend something that's going to give you extra damage as well as penetration for your build. So something like Spriggan's Thorns, for example, very easy to pick up overland set in ESO. This gives us everything we need to kill as fast as possible. We have max stamina, which is our basic resource. We have weapon damage, of course, for increased damage on our skills. And then physical penetration is probably more important than you think. This is actually going to make your skills do as much damage as possible, as close to true damage as possible. Without physical penetration from something like Spriggan's or a sharpened weapon trait, your abilities are just going to do less in terms of your overall DPS, and then you're going to kill things slower. You're going to bring in less experience per hour. So maximizing your penetration is going to be the best way to get started on your build. Now, if you're a Magicka build, you can also use a similar set called Spinners. Spinners does exactly the same thing except for Magicka builds. So this gives us max Magicka, spell damage, and spell penetration. So if you're a Magicka build, I would recommend picking up Spinners. If you're a stamina focused build, pick up Spriggan's. And of course, there are many more sets you can pick up to add to your build to make it easier to grind XP. Crafted sets are also going to be a very easy way to go. Many more good set options are listed over on my website, hacktheminotaur.com. Make sure to check out the written guide, link in the description below. You don't need fancy trials gear, you don't need dungeon sets or anything like that. Now, as you decide on your gear, you'll want to start planning out traits. And the best trait, obviously, for grinding up CP and experience points in general, that's going to be the training trait. This increases your experience gained from each kill. And the percent that you gains depends on the slot where the item is equipped, as well as the quality. You can see my gold dagger right here gives me 4.5%. Gold armor pieces actually give you 11%. So like boots, gloves, waist. Number 2, these give you every stat that you're going to need, either for a stamina or a Magicka build. So Dubious, again, is for stamina classes. We have stamina recovery, max stamina, and max health. Those 3 main stats, your main recovery, your main resource, max stamina in this case, and the bonus health, those are going to set you up for a really successful soloing or grinding style build. Number 1, because you're going to get your health up to a pretty decent level. You want around 20k or so. You can see my build has about 21k. That's because I've got the Dubious running. Over 30k on your main resource. That's my stamina for Dubious. And then you want your recovery actually as high as possible. And the nice thing about these 2 drinks is that they both offer recovery. So either stamina recovery or Magicka recovery. You can see on my Stamina Templar, which is what I'm playing right now, 1700 stamina recovery. That's without any potions or other buffs active. This is really good for grinding XP, you guys. You want as much recovery as possible because you're going to be casting your abilities a lot. Now, to go along with that, you will want a potion that's going to buff that main resource. So in my case, being a stamina build, I want a stamina potion. Pretty simple, right? This restores max stamina. It also gives me some other buffs. But the main buff you want here is major endurance. So that's going to increase my stamina recovery by another 30%. This is changing in the Flames of Ambition DLC, by the way. It used to be 40%. Now it's 30%. Really doesn't matter. I have plenty of recovery. You can see I'm over 2k buffed stamina recovery now. That's really good. So again, your potions should support your max resource. No, you don't need fancy, expensive potions. You can use the basic, essence of stamina, essence of Magicka, because these give you the same buff. You can see this is going to increase my Magicka recovery by 30% as well. This is a trash potion. You can get this for free. from mobs just in the overland. So again, as long as it's supporting your main resource, either magicka or stamina, that's the potion that you want. Other consumables, I recommend some repair kits. You can buy these. You can also get them from the daily rewards, crown store, things like that. This is just what I happen to have on this character. Your repair kit is going to restore the quality of your armor. That's going to be important when you're out in the world grinding for long periods of time. Your armor quality will deteriorate over that time. You'll get less and less bonuses, less and less stats from your armor. Sometimes that even affects what abilities you can use on your character. So as a rule, I just keep a few of these on my character at all times. That way I don't have to travel back to town. And then finally, some type of experience buff. Now there's many different versions of these. There are, of course, the experience scrolls. You can get these from daily rewards, crown store, crown crates, all that good stuff. You also have the potion variety, which is technically a drink. You have Psijic Ambrosia and the various forms of that. Go ahead and use one of these before you start grinding. That way you're going to maximize your experience gain as much as possible. So we have our buffs, we have our increased experience, we have our food, we have our potion. ESO Plus members do get a 10% experience bonus modifier. That's something to keep in mind as well. Now, what Mundus is best for this type of build? Well, it does depend slightly on the setup of your character. I am partial to the Lover Mundus. That's for the extra spell and physical penetration that it can add to your build. We talked about this a little bit earlier in this setup, but you want your penetration for your main resource, either physical or spell. You want that to be pretty close to around 9,000. Now, that's not for a DPS build. I'm not talking about trials or veteran dungeons or that type of content. I'm talking specifically about grinding easy mobs for experience. In most cases, you will be doing that either in overland zones, public dungeons, maybe even delves. But those specific areas, the mobs there have very low physical resistance, about 9,100 physical resistance exactly. So the closer you can get to that 9,100 penetration mark, the more damage your abilities are going to do, which obviously is going to let you grind those enemies quite a bit faster. So for all builds, especially if you don't have a lot of great gear, putting the Lover Mundus on your build is actually going to help out a lot with that. That's what I would recommend at least. Obviously, that can change a little bit depending on your build, what class skills, what weapon skills you're looking at. So let's talk about those next. What weapons, for example, are good for grinding CP? So if you're a stamina build, I think you have two very good options. That's going to be dual wield, so dual daggers in my case. Or if you don't like that playstyle, another great option is going to be two-hander. 2H skill line. Now, why are these better for grinding XP versus like a bow or a one-handed shield? Well, it really comes down to the weapon skills that you have access to through those weapons. So for example, two-handed, I have two really strong skills for grinding CP. I have Brawler. Brawler does AoE cleave damage in front of my character. It also gives me a free damage shield, which is very strong. And then I also have Reverse Slice. Now you want the Reverse Slice morph here because not only is this an execute skill, it does AoE execute damage. You can see it deals up to 300% more damage to enemies as their health goes lower, and it does splash damage, 78% of the damage to nearby targets. So the fact that I have two very strong AoE-focused abilities makes the two-hander a very good option for stamina builds. Going along with that, I also really like dual wield, specifically Steel Tornado. Steel Tornado is also an AoE execute like Reverse Slice, but you actually do not need a target with this, and it does AoE damage in a circular radius around you. So the difference is Reverse Slice is a cone in front of you. Dual wield, Steel Tornado, this is AoE. You can hit targets no matter what direction you are facing, so I do like that as well. There you go. Doesn't matter where the enemies are. I'm going to kill them off pretty quick with that Steel Tornado. So that's what I would recommend for stamina builds. Of course, if you are a magicka build, you'll probably be looking at a Destruction Staff. Now, why is Destruction Staff good for grinding CP? Very similar to stamina builds. You just have more AoE capabilities with Destruction Staff. You have skills like Wall of Elements. For example, I'd probably use Unstable Wall. This does AoE damage out in front of you, damage over time. Then, of course, you also have Impulse. Impulse is really nice. Pulsar or Elemental Ring, could use either one. But this is nice because it does AoE damage around you. So it's similar to Steel Tornado. This is kind of the Magicka version of Steel Tornado, if you will. And the last thing I'll say about that is your Destruction Staff type does matter. If you can pick up a Lightning Staff, that is preferred for grinding. And the reason why actually has to do with one of the passives here. The Tri-Focus passive, Lightning Staff heavy attacks damage nearby enemies for 100% of the damage done. So that's similar to the two-handed passives. Two-hand has a very similar passive where it actually does AoE splash damage. Lightning Staff does it as well, but it's the strongest passive in the game for that because you can see it does exactly the same amount of damage, 100% damage in an AoE. So anything that's close to an enemy, as long as you're holding down that heavy attack, you're going to be damaging all those other targets as well. So it works really good for AoE grinding, does the Lightning Staff. So as you can see in terms of skills, anything that does AoE damage is going to be preferable. You want to look in your class toolkit for skills like that as well. For example, I'm on my Templar here, Biting Jabs or Puncturing Sweep. Either version, this does AoE damage as well. Almost every class has access to some AoE class skills, so that's what you're really going to look at. Whether you're playing a Nightblade, Warden, Necromancer, Sorcerer, Dragon Knight, make sure you have a couple of AoE abilities on your bar in addition to those AoE weapon skills. And then you're going to have a really nice combination on your build for AoE damage and for grinding XP. Pretty simple. Let's talk about champion points. There are plenty of options for champion points in the new CP 2.0 system coming out very shortly here. I just want to point out a couple of these that you'll want to pick up right away if you're trying to increase your overall CP. Number one, over here in the green tree, Steed's Blessing, this increases your out-of-combat movement speed by up to 20%. So you drop 50 points in this node, you get 20% movement speed while out of combat. This is amazing, you guys. This is going to help you move from group to group throughout a dungeon, wherever you're grinding, overland, much, much faster. If you only have 50 points, only 50 champion points, I would drop them here first, definitely. And another one that's really good as well, Gilded Fingers increases your gold gained by 2%, so up to 10% increased gold. If you're going to be grinding a lot of champion points, you might as well be getting gold at the same time, so this is really going to help with that. Those are probably my top two picks in the green tree. Let's move over to the blue tree. There's a lot of good stuff you can pick up here as well. Now, if you don't have a lot of champion points, which you probably don't if you're trying to grind more of them, there are some very simple options. Now, you have to start here in the middle, so Precision. This gives you a little bit of extra crit chance, so I would go there first. And then I would go over here to the Extended Might. This is actually a sub-constellation, which you open up next. And you can drop 40 points into here to get 1,400 offensive penetration. Remember, we talked about that in the setup as well, where the more penetration you have, the more damage you're doing, the faster you're going to be able to kill off enemies. So maxing this out right away, I would definitely recommend that. So that's only 50 points. That's all I need to get to there. From that point, you can put into as many offensive passives as you want. You can go over here. For example, you could buff your AoE damage on Templar, for example. This would be good. You could buff your critical damage and critical healing. This might be really good for like a Sorcerer or a Nightblade. You can come over here, specifically if you're a stamina build, and pick up Reaving Blows. This is very similar to the Ring of the Pale Order, but it's actually a passive CP node. When you deal direct damage, you heal for 7% of the damage done. So this is actually very good for any build, actually, but stamina build specifically. When I'm doing damage with jabs, every single hit of that is healing me back 7%. So that is really nice just for sustaining my health overall. I don't even have to heal, really, because overland content is so easy. So that's what I would recommend there. Then in the blue tree, a couple of things I would recommend here as well. Boundless Vitality. If you have 50 points, just drop it here. This gives you 1,400 extra max health. That's pretty nice. Rejuvenation. This increases all your recoveries by 150. And that 150 does scale up with things like the bonus from our potions. So it's actually quite a bit more. That's why my recovery was so high on this build. By the way, I do have Rejuvenation unlocked in the red CP. So that's only 100 champion points I need to spend in the red tree for those two. If you want complete overkill as far as, what you are getting in terms of resources, then coming over here to pick up either siphoning spells if you're a Magicka build or Bloody Renewal if you're a stamina build. These give you up to 1,500 resources back per kill. That's per kill. That's like a lot. When you're stacking up a lot of enemies, you have pretty much infinite resources. You will need a little bit more CP to unlock that because you need to go through the tree here. So that would only be with later builds if you have enough CP for these. Then you would start putting it in here. That's probably not necessary. Depending on how you build your character, you probably won't need that much extra stamina or magicka, but it's something to look at for sure. Two really nice passives there. So that should give you some great ideas to start with. Let's go ahead and jump into the best grinding locations right now. First up on our list, I want to talk about overland zones. These, believe it or not, are some of the best grinding locations in the game. That's because overland enemies give you the most experience in the game per enemy. Now, one of my favorite locations is here in the zone of Stone Falls. This is a base game zone, so anybody can access it. We're going to be here at Fort Virak in the very northernmost part of the zone. It's pretty out of the way from other players, so hopefully you won't see many crowds here. But there are so many enemies here, you guys, and they have very quick spawn times as well. That's one of the other things you want to look for in an overland zone because spawn times do vary. Try to find locations like these where enemies just pop up very quickly. And you can see there's tons of enemies here. There's multiple groups, so we're just going to bring as many as we can find into a big circle in the center and then grind them down with those AoE skills that we talked about earlier. Once you finish the first group, keep heading south and there'll be even more mobs to pull from. Next up, we're in the zone of Malleable Tor near the Bandari trading post. This is another excellent spot that most people don't know about. And this is pretty interesting, in fact, because these aren't really enemies that you're going to grind. These are actually neutral NPCs. They're kind of like a mercenary, and you can tell that they're a neutral NPC because they have this yellow colored outline. And what's nice about that is you do not gain any bounty on your character. Lots of these are hanging out at these camps, and they have one of the highest spawn rates I've been able to find in the game. Very quick respawns here. Lots of enemies to pull from. As usual, just grab them all in the center. Use some type of range weapon, so a staff, obviously, for a Magicka build, a bow, or some skill if you are a stamina build. Bring them all in the center, nuke them down, make sure you save your ultimates for that, and there you go. Very good XP at this spot as well. All right, next up we have a classic. We'll be talking about werewolves in the zone of Glenumbra, here near the Camlorn section of the zone, but there's actually an unmarked location just below that, a little fort that I like to grind XP at. You actually need to start a quest here with the general to kick this off. So just accept the quest and then head inside the fort, talk to the orc NPC here, and she's going to basically be fighting against the werewolves. She will actually spawn in separate waves of werewolves, basically 2 at a time. And then there's lots of other werewolves off on the sides in these camps that you can pull in, fight all of them together, and it's an absolute ton of experience. Now, one of the best reasons to fight werewolves is they actually give you bonus XP. They have a little bit more health than your standard enemy in the Elder Scrolls Online, so the game actually rewards you with 50% bonus experience. So even though there aren't as many werewolves here, keep in mind that each werewolf is giving you bonus XP per kill. Now, there are 4 areas where the NPC is going to stop and summon those waves. So basically just go through each of the 4 locations, let her summon the werewolves in, but do not complete the final quest. If you don't speak to the NPC after she's done, you can actually go back to the beginning of the fort, drop the quest from your journal, and then restart the whole thing over, starting all the spawns over again. It's a really good spot for experience. Another great location is in the zone of Stormhaven here at Farangel's Landing, very close to the main city of Wayrest. You'll be fighting against these bandits, and not only do these have very fast spawn timers, but this is a very large area with lots and lots of enemies that you can pull. So try to gather as many as you can. I'm talking maybe 3-4 groups at a time if you can handle it. Group them all up in the center and then burn those ultimates to get them down as quick as possible. Now, there are several areas like this on the beach, so just keep wandering around. You'll see tons of enemies here, even mud crabs that you can pull in for even more experience if you want. Once you finish the enemies at the beach, you can loop around the backs of the houses, come back to the front of the area, and then start all over again. It's really easy. Then the final overland spot I want to show you guys is in the zone of Dushan. This is Muthnar. I'm not sure how to say that, but this is a basic zombie grind. So if you know anything about zombies in Elder Scrolls Online, very easy, very common way to grind experience because they're always melee enemies. They're very easy to pull in and group together. So this is a great area. Again, it's like an abandoned town. You just make a wide circle, pulling in as many zombies as you can. There's little packs of them all spread out, usually about 2 or 3 at a time. So try to grab as many of those groups as possible. At least 3 to 4 groups at a time will be very, very good experience. And there's also other enemies here as well. There's some casters as you get near the back of the town. Those are fine too. And interestingly enough, sometimes they will fight against each other, the casters versus the zombies. Now, if you see them fighting off, make sure you tag or hit the zombie first, and then the other NPC will insta-kill it and give you credit for the kill. If you attack the other NPC, the zombie will die, but you won't get any experience. So that's something you can do for a little bit of extra quick XP in this case. Now moving away from overland zones, I want to talk about public dungeons. These are absolutely fantastic farms for experience. Now you will note that each enemy gives slightly less experience versus an overland zone, but public dungeons make up for it by the fact that there's so many enemies clustered tightly together. They have very fast respawns. And in addition, some of these zones that I'm going to show you have very good loot drops as well. Tons of gold that you can get. It's a definite benefit for public dungeons versus overland. First on our list is going to be the Obsidian Scar public dungeon. This is in the zone of Rivenspire here in the middle. Great grind location. I like this center room. It has the most enemies grouped up together. You have 3 or 4 groups here that you can all pull to the center. Once you're done with those, you can then go on to the tunnels on either side, make a loop, and then come back to that main room. The enemies here are slightly harder than overland enemies, I will say. Plus, there are a lot of them. So go at your own pace here. You don't have to pull the entire room if you can't handle it. You can go with 1 or 2 groups at a time, work your way up to it. But once you're able to pull everything, then you will see the experience and the loot absolutely fly in. Another great spot is going to be the Lion's Den public dungeon. This is in the Rift. I hardly ever see anybody here, and it's an absolutely massive zone, as you can see. We're just going to focus on the entrance, really, because there's plenty of enemies here to deal with. So go ahead and start at the camps here. These enemies are Imperial types, by the way, so they do have a lot of gold for you guys. But you'll want to, as usual, grab 2 or 3 groups, pull them all into the center, drop your ult if you have it. Once you've dealt with those initial camps, you can head towards the back through these gates. Even more enemies spawn behind here. Lots and lots of enemies. So you want to run up the hill, grabbing as many of those groups as possible. Pull them in, knock them down, and then that's pretty much it for this zone. I'll just head back to the entrance and start again because the spawns are so fast, you'll have plenty of enemies to choose from here. Next, let's talk about Rakindalef. This is in the zone of Hrothgar. That's part of the Orsinium DLC, and this is one of the OG early grind spots in Elder Scrolls Online. Now, you want to progress through the public dungeon a little bit. The entrance is not that great. You'll want to actually come out to this main open area where you have all of these orcs. And there are several camps of orcs. Again, you can pull them together, or you can deal with them one at a time. Just depends on what your build can handle. But I will start here on the right side, then head down to this bridge area. Go ahead and defeat the enemies here on the bridge. From there, you can drop down to the floor level. There's about 3 big groups here you can pull together in the center by these little fires. Lots of great experience and loot here. Things you can sell as well as just pure gold from the drops. Then you'll come back to this bridge on the other side, and now you have a choice. You can head left to go back to the start of the open area if that's all that you can handle. Or if you want more enemies, head to the right and up the mountain. And there's a completely new section of the zone here on the left with even more orcs that you can pull from. These next 2 public dungeons, some of my favorite grind spots in the game, starting off with the Vile Manse and Reaper's March. One of the reasons why I like these next 2 public dungeons is they both contain Imperial enemies, which are known to drop just tons and tons of gold. So obviously, the more enemies you're grinding here, not only are you getting good XP, but you're getting really good loot as well. As is the case with all the public dungeons on this list, it's totally up to you, though, how many enemies you can handle at once. Generally, the groups here are about 5 to 6 or 7 enemies. As you're roaming the hallways, you'll come across individual groups, which are very easy to handle like this. But then once you get into the open areas, then you'll have maybe 3 or 4 groups. So you'll have something like 20 enemies at once that you can pull together. And that's where the experience really starts to roll in. And one of the reasons I love this dungeon is there's actually a secret area underneath the tunnels as well. If you come to this spot on the map and you drop down this literal hole in the ground, you will come across the secret area. Now, this is part of a quest, which is actually a pretty cool quest. It's one of my favorites in the game as well. But the enemies here are less frequently used by other players, so it should be open to you. You'll now have a mixture of undead and imperial, so you get the extra bonus of like Fighters Guild experience if you happen to need that on your character. But again, lots of enemies condensed in a small area. In the bigger rooms, you'll have 2, 3, maybe even 4 groups you can pull together. So lots of XP and gold can be found here as well. And our last public dungeon is in the zone of Minotaur. We're talking about Crimson Cove. I've leveled so many characters here. And the reason, again, lots of enemies, lots of XP, lots of gold. Now, there are 3 main sort of areas, 3 big caverns you want to focus on. One of these is probably enough for you because the spawn rates here are so fast. So if you focus on one of these big caverns like I'm at here, you can see there's 3 groups on this side. There's even more on the other side. Plus, there's the side tunnels. This is plenty for you to pull. So you can actually share this zone with other players as well, or you can choose to group up. Remember, if you do group with another player, a second player increases your XP modifier, so you can get even more experience that way. Here's another of the main sections. This is the main cavern near the entrance, so you'll typically find a few people here, as I did. But again, plenty of enemies here to share, and the XP gains are massive. So moving on from public dungeons, one more type of grind that I prefer is arenas, whether it be group arenas or solo arenas. So one great example is Dragonstar Arena, found in the zone of Craglorn. This is actually a 4-player group arena, but if you choose to play this on normal, it's quite easily soloed. Now, why are arenas good for grinding experience? Well, basically, you are stuck in one area, and the game just throws waves of enemies at you. And like I mentioned, if you're playing on normal, the enemies are quite easy, and they still give really good experience. Plus, there's some unique sets that drop throughout the arenas in ESO, so it's quite a good place to grind if you're looking for something different. The other benefit here is that these are instance zones, which means it's only going to be you, so you don't have to deal with crowds at all. But you can see here's the first arena in Dragonstar, quite easy to solo. Here's one of the next rounds. And you just basically go through each round facing off each wave. There will be a boss at the end, but I recommend trying it. It's a lot of fun. You can also test out some of your skills, test out your build while earning some pretty good experience. And speaking of arenas, here's obviously the original solo arena in the game, that being Maelstrom Arena. This is in the zone of Hrothgar, so you need the Orsinium DLC for this one. But again, the game is going to throw you into these smaller, confined spaces, send in wave after wave of enemies, and this is just free experience, you guys. Obviously, you'll probably want to do this on normal, especially if you don't have a lot of champion points to begin with. It's not that difficult on normal once you understand the mechanics, and as a bonus, you're going to learn a lot about how to play the game as well as you go through these. So if you're looking for something different to break up the monotony a little bit, definitely check out the arenas in ESO. And with that said, everybody, that's going to wrap up this video, our ultimate CP grind guide for the Elder Scrolls Online. Of course, if you enjoyed the video today or you found it informative at all, don't forget to crush that like button. It really helps out the channel. If you have any suggestions for us, please put those down in the comments section below. If there's anything I missed, let's help each other out with that and make this video the best possible. There is a written guide for this, by the way, over on my website, hacktheminotaur.com, where I do have some other tips and tricks for leveling up quickly, even a few grind spots that I didn't have time to fit in this video. So go ahead and check the link in the description for that when you get a chance. I'm also working on some really great CP grind builds, both for stamina and magicka. These are really powerful, you guys, and a lot of fun to play. So keep an eye on the channel for those very soon in the near future. And as always, thank you all again so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.